Hey everybody, and welcome back, or welcome if you are new. Hello, hi. So you might be wondering, McKay, hello, why are you wearing some fancy ass suit jacket? It's because one, I bought this the other day for a job that I applied for. It was just serving boss, and I was just like, I need this in my life. And two, today I am filming one of the most important videos a booktuber can make, and that is the best books of year X. In this case, we're talking about the best books of the year of 2022, and you know what? I'm just excited, okay? I am here to celebrate my love for books, love for literature, love for this community, and just all the gratitude because I love you all. So, today we're gonna be talking about the top books of the year 2022. Now, I normally only stick to 10 books because I feel like that's just, you know, the standard number. But this year I saw people posting top 22 best books of the year 2022, but that seemed like too much. I want to keep it to a small number so I can show what the elite books were of the year. So I kind of met in the middle and decided to do the top 15 books of 2022. The reason I expanded the number was for a couple of things. Long story short, I read the most amount of books this year that I've ever read in my entire life, okay? In this year alone, I read 220 books. That is crazy. What am I doing with my life? I don't know, interesting question. But with that being said, before we get into anything, if you are a fan of extreme horror, thrillers, and the smuts, I highly think we could be best friends in here. And in order to solidify that friendship, I would recommend clicking the subscribe button down below, notifying yourself of when I post new shit, and liking the video. Cool. Also, I'm on Bookstagram and I'm on Goodreads, links to those down below. But with that being said, let us talk about the best books of 2022. Okay, pause. I would just like to give an honorable mention, and that is to the Mindfuck series by St. Abbey. This is a book about female lady rage, good for her, female serial killer, good stuff. It got super popular on TikTok. It's so sad that the author had passed away because she never got to see just how popular and well-loved this book series deservedly became. I was loving this series from the first fucking book, okay? Like, I know the writing is not the best, but this series has personality, okay? It has flavor. It has anger and rage, and I was just fucking obsessed, okay? Another shout out I want to give is to the book We Spread by Ian Reid. Ooh, this book was so incredible. It is very similar, but also completely different from I'm Thinking of Ending Things in a way that is going to be so hard to explain. It's very similar in terms of how the story evolves and the journey the character goes through, and the overall feeling of dread and foreboding anxiety to confusion to denial that you, the reader, goes through while you read the book. But this book is far more accessible and easier to comprehend. Like, you wouldn't need to do a 30-minute analysis video on it like what I did in order to decipher the various hidden meanings in the text. No. This book is a very beautiful and haunting and ultimately horrifying story of Alzheimer's and being in the winter of your life, and the horrifying things that come with having the brain of an old person, something that we will all get to at some point should we be lucky enough to get to that age. Yeah, great stuff. Now, here's the rest of the list. At number 15 is one I have right here, Notes on an Execution by Dania Kukafka. Apologies if I mispronounced that name. But wow, this is one of the most beautifully written books I have ever read. It was a very beautiful experience, which is saying something because what this book talks about is very dark, very tragic. But oh my gosh, my copy of this book is vandalized with notes, annotations, highlights. Yes, I'm one of those people who write on their books, okay? I paid for the damn thing, it's mine, and if I want to put my personal imprints and thoughts on the margin area, I'm gonna fucking do it. So that's what I fucking did. This book, amazing, so fucking good. This book is essentially about the death penalty, and it gives you so many perspectives on the pro side, the anti side, and kind of leaves it up to you to determine what side of the debate you fall on. And it does so in the most interesting way. So you have the point of view of a serial killer, which is told from the second person. So you know, they're addressing you, the reader. It really puts you into the headspace of this person, this serial killer named Ansel. And you really feel for the guy. He's very like, oh, I wish I wasn't like this. I wish I didn't want to do what I'm doing. So you kind of really feel for him and see in his head. But the book doesn't sympathize with him. The book actually puts the focus on the orbit of women surrounding him. So you follow several women like his mom, and not the woman who he killed, but the sister of the woman he killed. So it really shows you the vast, encompassing orbit of sadness and tragedy that surrounds murder and the consequences of that happening. And it talks about whether or not seeing someone executed in the death penalty will bring you that catharsis that you think you're gonna get. And this book is just so incredible and fascinating. I've got so many notes. I'm honestly thinking of maybe doing a full video explaining why this is a masterpiece. So if any of you would like to see that, comment down below and I will see what I can do, okay? Next, I want to talk about a book that is actually very similar thematically, and that is True Crime by Samantha Kolesnik. Yes, at number 4 we've got True Crime. This book is an actual masterpiece. I love this book so much with my entire being. I read this book very early on for my Women in Horror vlog, which you can find on my channel. I will try to link it down below. But this book was so special to me because it's not extreme horror, but it is a very raw and gritty look at the life of someone who has grown up with abuse and the repercussions that that would have long-term on someone. And it also talks about serial killers and how society views them. And we basically follow this woman who has to grapple with so many questions, so many complex questions about the world because of how her mother treated her when she was a kid and because of all the horrific things that she had to deal with growing up. And the writing is just pristine. It is beautiful. It talks about abuse and neglect. The characters in the book serve as a microcosm of the society in which they live in. It's set in the vast, forgotten lands of Middle America, and you know, the forgotten lands, just like the forgotten people who have been neglected and forced to go through life on their own, the people who feel like there's no one looking out for them, you know, the people who feel like they've been left behind. There's so much that this book talks about that reminded me of the film Badlands by Terrence Malick. Yes, True Crime is such a fantastic book and I can't recommend it enough. So at number 13 we have Boy Parts by Eliza Clark, and this book was one of those books that I didn't really think I was going to get much out of, but the premise was very interesting to me. We basically follow this woman who photographs erotic photos of men, and I was like, is this gonna be smutty? It's not, okay? It is pretty juicy, but it is a very slow burn, A24-esque horror book about female toxic manipulation. This book is really hard to describe, and if I were to do so, I would say that it's like if American Psycho was written by a woman and had a female protagonist that had very different proclivities, that had a more rich backstory, that gave answers to certain motivations and very different obsessions and proclivities, then that would be this book, okay? So in American Psycho, it was money and Wall Street. Over here, it's the art world. So that's the best way that I could describe this book, and the vibes were just immaculate, okay? I was genuinely scared of this protagonist as I was reading from her point of view, but reading from her point of view was one of the best experiences I've had in my entire reading life. Like, the vibes were immaculate. Being in her head made me feel so uneasy, but also so fascinated. She is one of the most fascinating characters I've ever read from. And her taste in movies, beautiful, amazing, spectacular, okay? She was recommending movies that I thought that only I had seen, okay? I mean, obviously other people have seen them, but how many people do you know who've seen the film Sex, the Annabelle Chong story about the porn star who gets gangbanged by 200? There was even a scene where she was talking about how she would show her roommate movies, and during the movie night she would pick movies like The Human Centipede and Urotsuki Doji, that extreme horror anime tentacle kind of movie. So I was just like, I want to be this bitch's best friend so bad, but I also kind of hate what she's doing and think she needs to go to jail, but I also want to be her best friend. I don't know what to do with my life but this book. So although I am conflicted on how I feel about her, I am not conflicted with how I feel about this book. As a matter of fact, when I was reading this book, I posted an Instagram story saying if this book doesn't get 5 stars, I'm deleting my channel, and it's a 5-star book. It's on my best of the year list. So next, I'm gonna be talking about probably the biggest surprise, well, the second biggest surprise. The actual biggest surprise is at number 7. Probably one of the biggest surprises that I've read this year. So at number 12, we have From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Wow, this book was incredible. I don't know what happened. I just was obsessed. I was in love. It was like the kind of book that I wish ACOTAR had been. I loved the main characters. I loved the situation, the setting. This was just like the perfect kind of fantasy for me. It relied a lot on the characters and the action as opposed to the world building. Not a huge fan of excessive world building, okay? That's just not the kind of reader I am. I like to imagine my own shit, you know? I just need the storyline. And this book gave me that storyline. And the storyline was spicy. It was literally every single trope that I like in romance, which was enemies to lovers, forced proximity, slow burn, but take that trope and put it in a dangerous fantasy land setting and have some romantic tension. So much tension, oh my gosh. The main guy was given some like Rhysand vibes, and it was just working for me. When they in the middle of a fight scene, I was just, yes. Just yes. Another book I really fucking loved that I read this year was one that I went in with not the best intentions, okay? And that book is Saint by Sierra Simone. I was going through like a smut phase. I heard about this book called Priest by Sierra Simone. I had read Sierra Simone before I read A Lesson in Thorns because so I heard that this author had written this book called Priest, which is like about priest smut, and I was like, interesting, but heteronormative. And then I realized that this was a series, and there was like a male-male pairing, and I was like, I'm reading this book, fuck the rest of the series, I'm skipping straight to this book, and bitch, this book was everything. Okay, it was everything. We follow these two men, Aiden and Elijah. They were in a relationship prior to the events of the story, but the relationship, you know, didn't work out. Aiden ended up leaving Elijah and his entire life to become this monk in this monastery, and Elijah ended up engaged to this other guy. But one thing leads to another, and Aiden has to go on this spiritual journey and literal journey. He's going on this journey to make sense of his inner world and his life and every decision he's made up until this point. And Elijah, through a certain series of events, ends up going on that journey with him. And this book had all the tropes that I wanted. It was slow burn, forced proximity, close proximity, but it wasn't like they have to be in the same specific place at the same time. It was like they are in the same place, but a wall is dividing them, but they're in such close proximity. And the tension, this book had more tension than half the fucking extreme horror books I read this year. Okay, it was a lot of tension. The build up and the fact that the tension is like so underscored by everything you learn about them throughout the story. I was going into this book expecting trashy priest smut, and although it does have the latter, there is nothing trashy about this story. Nothing at all. This book was profound, it was mature, it was so beautifully written, and I was just so emotionally invested with these two characters and what they were going through, and just seeing them navigate such mature adult situations. Not like mature like but mature like, wow, the depth of understanding that this author had for the inner turmoil and inner anguish and regret. Regret plays a huge role in this story, and it's something that is just permeating this entire atmosphere that these characters have found themselves in, and it is just so fucking beautiful. Alright, so I'm currently editing the video, and I could have been more specific. So a lot of Aiden's internal turmoil comes with reconciling his Christian faith with his sexuality, because a lot of, you know, doctrine says that it's a sin and he wants to adhere to his faith, but then he's also very much in love with Elijah, and a lot of that struggle is the main conflict in the story, and it's both an internal conflict and an external conflict. He struggles to reconcile his love with Elijah and reconcile that with his faith, and the way Sierra Simone goes about examining this conflict, which on one hand is between Aiden and Elijah, but on the other hand between Aiden and himself. And the way Sierra Simone goes about this and presented such a beautiful understanding of the human condition, and yeah, just thought that I'd add that in there. By the end of this book, I was a mess. I was an emotional mess. I was an emotional mess. And that line, if you read this book, if you know, you know, that line about the don't make me compete with the fireflies in the cloister, dead, leveled, decimated, just deceased. It took me out. I was just like a fucking puddle in the corner of the room. It was a lot, okay? It was a huge thing, and yeah, let me just put it that way. So now we're getting into the top 10. These are the best of the best books that have come out this year. At number 10, we have an extreme horror book, and that is For the Sake of Two by Judith Sonnet. Oh my gosh, this is one of the most explicit, graphic, intense, gory, disgusting, offensive, disturbing extreme horror books I have ever read in my fucking life. It did every single thing that an extreme horror book has to do. It ticked every single box for me, and then some. Not only was this a sequel, this was a sequel that vastly improved on its predecessor and was written on the same year as its predecessor. Yes, this author, Judith, has written, like, I'm not kidding, 20 books this year, some of which were written, edited, published in 10 days. Like, I had to pause because my brain just couldn't compute the amount of genius. And with that being said, every single book she's written has been so good. I haven't read them all, but of those that I have read, she hasn't gotten a single rating even remotely lower than 4 stars. Every single release has just been consistent, but oh my gosh, this book, okay, I have a full vlog of this book talking about how incredible it is, so I'm not gonna get into it so much now, but if I were to give a pitch, I would say it's Squid Games meets Survivor, or Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter, or The Summer I Died. Insert any super graphic extreme horror book, mix it with Squid Games, it's bloody games, it's dark web shit, it is so incredible. This is definitely one of the best extreme horror books I've ever read. And if you're a fan of the genre and you haven't read the For the Sake of Duology, soon-to-be trilogy, I would fix that if I were you, okay? Speaking of Judith Sonnet, she actually recommended her favorite book of all time to me. And that book is coincidentally number 9 on this list, and that is Endless Night by Richard Lehman. I loved this book so much, oh my gosh. This book was like Intensity by Dean Koontz, but on coke, and 500 pages long and 500 times more intense. For the first 200 pages, I could not put this book down. This has the most intense, anxiety-inducing opening 200 pages that I have ever read, and that anxiety was maintained for 300 more pages. What the fuck? And girl, and listen, that finale, the end, when there's a scene where a girl is searching a house, and that scene when she is searching the house had me shitting myself in the underwear, like paintballs out the It's one of those books where people are getting chased by someone, and that someone is getting chased by someone else because they stand to lose something. And for 500 pages, I was just like biting my nails, just like, oh shit, what's gonna happen? Great stuff. So fucking good. Okay, at number 8, we have the best thriller I have read all year, and that is The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. Now, this is not the only list you're gonna see her on this year. Her other book, In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, is probably one of the worst, if not the worst, thrillers I have read all year. Absolute trash. I read that book on the same vlog where I read this one, but we're gonna talk about this book, okay? So The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. This book was literally, it is, once again, the best thriller I have read all year. I went in with very low expectations. I went in expecting this, and I got this. Like, you can't even see the hand because it's above the screen. It's above anything that I was expecting. It was just incredible. I honestly felt like I was reading a Karen Slaughter book at points. This book was actually better than the one Karen Slaughter book I read this year. So just make of that what you will, okay? It is a book about modern day feminism. It does ask some very controversial questions, and it does follow a main character who we actually are willing to root for, unlike Jessica in My Dreams I Hold a Knife. Like, this character in this book, loved her. There's not really much I can say about this book, but I do have a full vlog, and in that vlog it was actually my birthday. So if you want to see how I spent my birthday last year, do check that vlog out. I will link it down below. Love the characters, loved the central mystery surrounding this book. It is a very dark thriller. This is one of the darkest thrillers I have come across recently. There is a heavy trigger warning that I need you to check up if you think you need to. The reason I read this book, despite vowing to not read a book by this author ever again, was because I was on these sprints, and I think it was Kayla from Books and Lala. She had expressed that she was going to choose this book for a book club, but she was advised against doing so because it was very dark. You would have to give specific trigger warnings that could spoil the plot for other people, and she decided against it. So I took that as my sign to be interested in the book. Like, you know, trigger warnings, super dark, will be guaranteed to disturb people, and I fucking loved it. It checked all the boxes, and with that being said, I went into this book knowing nothing, and if you are someone who thinks they don't need trigger warnings, I would suggest taking that same approach. This book starts off in a way that makes you think, okay, this book will definitely do this thing because I've seen this in thrillers before, and it goes into an insanely deep, dark, other direction that was very Eyes Wide Shut, Stanley Kubrick's last film. I'm just gonna put that out there, okay? At number 7, okay, Gavin, don't even think about it. I don't want to see your comments. At number 7, we have Den of Vipers by K.A. Knight. This is not a fucking prank. Whew. Where do I start with this book? Okay, I fully intended on reading this book so I could rip it a new one, so I could trash it, so I could bash it, so I could make K.A. Knight regret ever choosing to write a book in the first place, and I vlogged it, okay? And that vlog went so wrong, but so right. For those of you who don't know what this book is about, it's a reverse harem about this girl who gets sold by her dad to the mafia, and it is Diesel Viper. That is literally the entire review. That is the entire fucking review, okay? If you want to hear me make my case for this book badly and not sober, which is like the best way to read this thing, oh my gosh, let's be real here. I have a full hour-long vlog on this channel, which I highly recommend checking out because I go into full spoilers. I start off bashing the book, and the more I read it, the more you see how my taste evolves, and I literally just love this book so much. The scene with the knife. Yes. This book had sex scenes that resembled medieval torture methods, okay? The following items were used: knives, guns, needles, broken glass, fire. There is a scene where the guy tortures someone to death and they in the murder blood. Look, is anyone shocked that I love this book as much as I do? If you are, you don't know me as a person. And if you want to comment about how this book sucks, just fuck off, okay? Argue with the fucking wall, I don't want to fucking hear it. Next, at number 6, we have another book that I did a full vlog on, and that is Battle Royale by Koshin Takami. So I actually watched the movie so many times as a kid. That was not me misspeaking. I actually watched this movie when I was very young, and it was my favorite movie back then, and that probably explains a lot. I tried to get other people my age to watch it, and they all thought that I was a fucking freak. Has anything changed? I don't think so. I loved that film as a kid. I loved it as a teenager. And going into this book as an adult, I had heard that the film was very accurate, so I was under the impression that I was just gonna be getting the same thing. That is not the case. This book was like experiencing the story with brand new eyes. Experiencing this story as an adult really shed new light on just how much of a masterpiece this story is. From the political commentary to the social commentary, the stick it to the man message that this book had was just so fully realized, and the way this book pushed that message was so brutal. Literally, this is one of the most gory books I've ever read. It is like 600 pages long, but it does not feel like it, trust me. The book went by so fucking fast, and what was so incredible was just how Koshin Takami was able to get me to care so deeply about a cast of about 40 characters, and the way each and every one just felt so fully realized as a character, their backstories, their dreams, but the backstory sections weren't, you know, overbearing. Like, it was just enough to get you to understand who this person was, but so much of the development would come in seeing how they would handle certain situations that they were put in. And that's how I like to see my character development in horror books. I don't want the full flashback backstory. I would rather be given enough details to infer about who this character is, and then fill in the rest of the pieces when I see how they react and go about certain things in precarious situations that they have been put in. I'm a fan of showing, not telling. So the fact that this book did that on a masterful level was just so incredible. And I also do have a full vlog of this book on my channel, so check that out. At number 5 is another fucking masterpiece, and that is American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. This book does so many things well. So it basically serves as a satire mocking those kinds of guys, you know, those kind of, you know, like Trump Tower, Wall Street kind of guys. You get to see in his head, and you get to see how he views the world, and how he views the world is just so reprehensible and offensive that it honestly gets comical. On one hand, you're laughing at just how absurd and pathetic and shallow and disgusting this man's thoughts are, but then there's like an underlying sense of satire poking fun at every single thing he says. And the way Bret Easton Ellis manages to present these thoughts and simultaneously make fun of them is just so ingenious, frankly. I was just like, wow. Also, it is super fucking extreme horror. Like, this is one of the most graphic, extreme horror, lurid, disturbing death scenes I have ever read. Several of them. This book is really bloody. That rat scene made me want to puke. At number 4 is the book Brother by Anya Alborn. This book was so special to me because it's one that I didn't really have on my radar, but seeing a lot of people that I truly respect the opinion of say that this was one of their favorite books did make me very interested in picking it up, and it was just incredible. It is a story about this guy who grew up in this cannibal family. He's very much aware of what they do. He kind of participates, but he also is the only one in that family with some semblance of a conscience. And you get to see gradually why this is the case. I'm not gonna give it away. And this book is one of the most character-driven horror stories I've ever read. Given the premise, I was under the impression that this was gonna be an extreme horror book, like a graphic, gory exercise in cannibalistic bloodletting. And although it does have its moments, specifically toward the end, this book was ultimately a very beautiful and poignant character study about this person who just felt like he didn't belong in this world, in his family. And I was just so impressed with how this book took the approach of being such a tender and intimate and sympathetic character study, but also putting this person in a very unforgiving, dark world. Seeing how this character navigated this existence and his place in the world and his interactions with people outside of this house, and the awful dark things that happen in the house, and certain motivations of people. Like, you wonder if the word brother is referring to him or his older brother, who is probably one of the most terrifying and smart villains I've ever come across. It's about this dysfunctional family that preys on itself as a consequence of generational trauma, and it really hammers in how these characters live in a world so dark and bereft of hope. And we see all this through the very innocent but not so innocent eyes of this main character, Michael, and we really get to know him so well that the thesis of, you know, how much of a person's humanity can they lose should they choose to do certain things, how much of it will be gone, will all of it be gone, just seeing how this innocent mind was slowly broken apart, but was it fully broken apart in this world is just so fascinating, and this book was just beautiful. So at number 3 is, so I read for fun, I read for joy, I read for escapism, and this book put me on cloud fucking 9. No. This book put me on cloud 10. This book is one that I genuinely wish that I lived in. Their Boy by Cara D. Okay, so at the beginning of the year, I was going through a smut phase, and this fucking book is what this genre was made for, okay? Like, this is the hottest, steamiest. This book was everything. It was beautiful. It was escapism. It transported me into a world that I wished I was living in. I was like, can I just be this character, please? Can I just have this be my life situation? Can I just, like, switch places with this character? Like, can I have
nice, hard, creamy peanuts?
I don't even know if I can describe, like, the setup of this book. Okay, I will. Come here. So it's basically this, like, BDSM book, one sub, and he has, like, two, like, daddy doms, and they kind of, like, adopt him, and this, it's like, it's smutty, it's fantasy. Okay, so I've got a funny story about this book. I was actually reading this book on sprints with my friends Jan and Sarah, and I was so annoying because I kept unmuting the sprints to just scream and squeal and just like freak out because it was just beautiful. Yeah, it was just all the things. I just loved it. Okay, moving on. So next we're gonna talk about probably the most depressing book I've ever read in my entire life. Now, if you can give me escapism, I will love you. But if you can make me depressed, I will love you more. I don't know what that says about me, but books that are this sad just make me feel less alone. It's like, this author's going through some shit too. Yeah, they know how I feel. This is cool. Now, I can't relate to anything that happens in this story, but the sadness on display in this story shook me to my core, okay? So this book is Saving Noah by Lucinda Berry, and this fucking book is hands down probably the most bleak, depressing, sad thing that I have read, just probably next to A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This book made me feel so fucking uncomfortable. Out of all the extreme horror books that I've read, this book is not an extreme horror. It's a dark family drama. But this book made me so disgusted and uncomfortable and depressed. We follow this family as they realize that their son, who is named Noah, he is like a star athlete, he's got amazing grades, he's good looking, he is just like the perfect son, but they find out early on in the story that he has molested these young girls and has pedophilic disorder, okay? I heard through the grapevine that the author Lucinda Berry is perhaps a psychiatrist or someone who works adjacent in the mental health profession, and as a result she has studied this disorder, and the approach she takes to this book is one that is like an all-encompassing view of that affliction. So you actually see points of view of someone who has that disorder, and you see how badly they don't want to have it, how badly they wish that they didn't have these desires because they themselves know it's wrong. And I'm not saying that this is true for everyone, like there are some truly bad people in the world, but this book does show how someone who has that, you know, would not want to have it. But this book does not make excuses. Like, this book definitely shows that this thing is bad and that it should not be condoned. But what it also does, and what I think it does so well, is it puts you in the head of a family member who loves a person that has these monstrous, like, disgusting urges, you know? And that was what fucked me up the most. It is not a controversial thing to say that it is bad. It is awful, it is disgusting, it is monstrous. But what this book does is that it acknowledges that it's bad, but also has a very nuanced conversation about what that thing is like for people who love someone who is like that. And it's so fucking depressing. It was so tragic, and it just made me so uncomfortable and icky, but also is very thought-provoking. And I just have not stopped thinking about this book since. So with that being said, the #1 book of the year 2022. So I'm gonna just take -3 seconds to state the obvious. Empire the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. I don't see any reality, any world where this book is not the best book I've read all year, okay? I had tried reading his books before, Illuminae and Nevernight, and I rage quit both of them. I DNF'd them, they were just really bad, and I had no intention of reading this book, okay? It's a fantasy book, it is super long, and the author just has a very bad track record with me, but from page 1, I could not fucking put this book down. This book was a masterpiece. I loved every single thing about this book, okay? The characters, the setting, the world building, the way that the world resembles so many issues prevalent in our world today, from, you know, religion to bigotry, oppressive power structures, and the characters, the journey that we get taken on with these characters is incredible. Let me put it this way. So for those of you who've read ACOTAR, I'm sure you all hated Nesta Archeron, as did I, but then when you got to A Court of Silver Flames, you're like, oh no, we are all Nesta, we are all misunderstood. That was what I felt with like every single character in this book. Like Jay Kristoff, Court of Silver Flames' every character in this book, I thought that they were assholes at first, but then when we continued on with our journey with them, it was like there was so much depth and complexity to every single person in this book. And I'm saying the word person and not character because they all felt like actual, fully fleshed out, full-blooded people, and I just loved it. Also the setting, oh my gosh, this is a dark fantasy vampire novel. The monastery in the sky, the action, the characters, like the villain, lore, oh my gosh, female badass villain, tons of LGBT representation that just was so well done in this book. Every single time I flipped the page, it was just like incredible, incredible. It just kept getting so good that it like soared above the stratosphere of amazingness, and I'm like maybe tearing up, I don't know. Shut up, anyway, because this book is so fucking good. I definitely want to reread this book for sure, maybe when the second book comes out. Empire the Vampire is like far and beyond the best book I've read so far this year. One of my favorite books of all time. The journey I went on with these characters and just how much they mean to me. At the end, I was just looking into the void and I was like, what am I gonna do with my life now? It was one of those reads. I was in a mourning period, okay? So with that being said, thank you so much for watching. Best of luck to us in 2023 with our reading and our goals and whatnot. And yeah, with that being said, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I hope to see you all in future videos, and as always, take care. I lose myself